Weren't you dead too?
That wasn't me.
No. I remember that wizard ripped out your heart
This
out.
story's convoluted enough, don't you think?
True. James, you're the smartest person I know. What can you tell me about the sheet I brought you? The one from the geek. The one that said he's not dead?
Well, it's definitely 30 years old, and it's definitely his handwriting.
But the paper is what's really interesting.
This says the paper is actually composed of all floppy disks that were pulped and then dyed white.
The disc still held a code on them.
I pulled this program off the paper.
"30 years ago, the geek programmed this into a disk that he knew would reach me when he died.
Let me run this program through my printer.
Only the ivory ring of ancient times can resurrect he who wrote these rhymes. So seek out the spellcaster, fabulous might, and have him send you to one of ancient right." The bastard never could give you a straight answer.
Hi everyone, this is Comic Book Issues, and I'm your host, the Rosen Hacker. As some of you may know, I'm a longtime blogger here on That Guy with the Glasses, and I'd like to thank the management for giving me the opportunity to host this program. No one can fill the Last Angry Geek shoes, but I'd like to give my very best...
No, don't fight it. Don't fight it. I will be the new host of Comic Book Issues. It beats my current job at the Hard Rock Cafe as a busboy. Hey, clean up your own table, bass player from Styx. Now on today's episode, we're...
Wait a minute! I thought you and the Last Angry Geek were the same person. How can you be here if he's dead?
It's magic. I don't need to explain it.
Yeah, whatever, Quesada.
Don't you dare! Oh, I suppose you all want answers. You all want your continuity preserved. Well, I don't know why the Last Angry Geek and I aren't the same person anymore, okay? I don't know. But I know someone who does.
How is it that the Last Angry Geek and Cloak Number 1 are no longer the same person?
That's a very good question. And the answer is, shortly after Suburbanites, they got split into two separate people. Just like one of the greatest superhero stories of all time, the Red and Blue Superman. No? Well, how about the Cloaks are like the Venom symbiote from Spider-Man 3? Eventually, the Cloak was driven off him a la church bells. You should have seen the Last Angry Geek's emo dance. Look, what do you people want? We just spent an entire movie explaining that all the inconsistencies of the world come from a hole in space. If that's not good enough for you, I'm evoking the Misty Rule. It's just a show. You should really just relax. This is That Guy with the Glasses saying, there's no such thing as a stupid cameo until you're asked to appear on Comic Book Issues.
I don't know, it still doesn't make sense to me. In the last episode, you had Kat saying that he and the Last Angry Geek were obstacles together, not he... Oh, on today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at villains and how we like to test ourselves. For instance, in Suburban Nights, the ratio of cloaks to reviewers was easily doubled. But did that stop us? No. So today, we're going to look at one of the all-time greats as he takes on double his usual number of heroes in the miniseries Joe Quesada once said would never happen. This is Spider-Man.
Peter Parker swings through the night air, telling us how web-slinging through New York is the best part of his day. He foils a getaway by webbing up one of the crooks and then swings in, first knocking aside the driver and then knocking him out with a short break. The police try to arrest him, but he simply webs out. He catches sight of a purple haze emanating from another part of the city and heads off to investigate. Finding a seemingly abandoned factory, Spidey crawls in and finds a lot of strange machinery, which is giving off the same purple energy signature. He finds a bunch of high-tech suits and very advanced machines. It's when he finds a giant orb helmet that he puts 2 and 2 together. Mysterio almost bashes Peter's brains in.
Mysterio, I'm a huge fan! I have your t-shirts, your action figures, your videos. Anyone waiting for a pro wrestling joke might as well leave right now. I know I'm talking about the villain.
He's able to block the pipe with the helmet and kick Mysterio aside. Mysterio is ranting and not making sense, wondering why it had to be Spider-Man. Spidey web yanks him into a punch. He binds him up and Mysterio yells about not being able to enjoy his first death, but he'll get him this time. He gets to his gun, however Spidey avoids the bullets, which hit the generator. This creates a portal vacuum that sucks him in.
It's almost as if he ripped a hole in the very plot of this story. Of course, that would be stupid.
Spidey finds himself transported from New York at night to New York at daytime, with a strange-looking artificial island in New York Harbor. He returns to Mysterio's base only to find a half-naked woman. He considers going to the strange island when he catches sight of a mugging. He saves the man, who is grateful, but he remarks that Spidey's costume was in poor taste. That was Peter Parker's. Freaked out, he decides to head back to his apartment when he runs smack dab into Spider-Man. Mysterio wakes up to find his Spider-Man gone. Checking his security footage, he sees that Spidey went through a purple vortex into another reality. He slips on some gear and activates a remote-controlled avatar, a la the movie FX2. And it's here we realize that the main Marvel Universe Mysterio and the Ultimate Universe Mysterio are one and the same. Back in the Ultimate Verse, Peter and Miles try to figure out what's going on. When Miles actually guesses that he is Peter, original Spidey has had enough. He tries webbing up Ultimate Spidey, who from this point on we're just going to call Miles. But Miles manages to duck the shot. But this leaves him open to a split-legged kick that puts Chun-Li to shame. They go back and forth with Miles promising not to out Peter, even though pretty much everyone will still guess who he is in that costume. Miles takes him down with his venom sting and starts to unmask him. Peter comes to and kicks him off a building. When he realizes Miles might not have wall-crawling abilities, he dives after him but can't find him. This is because Miles can turn invisible, and he kicks Peter off the side of the building. Peter spins a web catching them before they become street pizza. Peter finally unmasks Miles, who uses the webs to conduct his venom sting because apparently web fluid is conductive. This also destroys the web, and it's only Miles' quick thinking with Peter's web shooter that saves them from a fatal plunge. Miles unmasks Spider-Man and wonders what to do next while looking at the Triskelion, headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D.
That's great! Peter's beaten the Green Goblin, the Vulture, Doc Ock, but he gets taken down by a pre-teen Spider-Man with less than a year's experience. Oh, I love it when heroes get taken down a notch.
Peter wakes up to find Samuel L. Jackson looking over him. Sam introduces himself as Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and asks if Spidey is Peter Parker. Peter then asks a hypothetical question. If you're a well-known superhero who had just put a lot of effort and thought and time into concealing your secret identity because you feared for the safety of your loved ones, but all of a sudden found yourself in a situation where suddenly your real name seems fairly well established and your mask was off, and then you ran into a teenage African-American version of your, well, self, and now you were talking to a, well, frankly, much cooler version of the Nick Fury that you were used to talking to, and you were pretty sure after you had some time to think it over that you may have either A, had a complete psychotic break, B, are being tricked by a former stuntman turned supervillain into thinking this is all real, or C, having accidentally transported to an alternate dimension that slightly resembles the one you're from, if not for the gigantic differences, what would you do? Nick takes Spidey up to the roof and introduces him to Miles Morales. Nick tells Miles to take Peter around the city and tell him what happened to their Peter Parker, while he tries to figure out how Spidey crossed over to this dimension. While in the copter, Peter asks the question that's been gnawing at him. Is this world's Peter Parker dead? Just then a missile collides with their helicopter. The Spideys escape with the pilot as Mysterio gloats over getting to kill 2 Spider-Men. The Spideys confront the villain as Miles recognizes him as Mysterio. He attacks, but Mysterio hurls him back at Peter and then blasts the pair into the East River. Then Mysterio summons up a group of ultimate and mainstream Spider-Man villains. Thinking they're typical Mysterio illusions, Peter leaps at the villain only to get taken down by Doc Ock just as Miles is jolted by Electro. They take a bit of beating before Miles manages to sidestep a Hulk hallucination and kick the Mysterio avatar, something felt by the real Mysterio. Peter webs away Mysterio's pendant, breaking the illusions, and the Avatar goes dead. Mysterio then decides a better way to win is to strand Peter in this universe. A moment later, the Avatar explodes. Miles comes to with the Ultimates standing over him. Iron Man admits to being baffled by the technology and will start reverse engineering it, but in the meantime, they all have another problem. Where is Peter? Peter, still not sure if this is all an illusion, heads to his home. He finds a convenience mart where it used to be. As he's asking the clerk a few questions, a robber walks in. He quickly knocks the robber out and borrows the clerk's tablet. It's then he confirms his fears. Peter Parker is dead. He notices the clerk is wearing a Spider-Man pendant. She's honoring the fallen hero, and Peter asks her to tell him what happened. Leaving their house, May Parker and her ward Gwen Stacy find Peter on their lawn. Thinking he's some depraved copycat, they start yelling at him to leave before he pulls off his mask. Peter tries to talk to them, but May slaps him, and then Gwen goes medieval on his spider ass. Miles arrives just in time to stop Peter from getting beat up by a teenage girl. When it finally hits that this is Peter, May faints. Back at the Triskelion, Tony Stark is beyond frustrated that someone like Mysterio figured out dimensional travel before him.
Yes, it's a little-known fact that Hollywood stuntmen have a basic understanding of physics and quantum theory. It's said that Lon Chaney Sr. perfected string theory while shoving fishhooks in his eyes for Phantom of the Opera.
The Ultimates decide it's time to bring Peter back in. When Stark admits to being surprised that Fury is letting him run loose, Nick admits that he failed the Ultimate Peter. Mary Jane Watson gets a call from Gwen about these events. In her house, May wakes up to hear voices coming from upstairs. She finds Peter, Miles, and Gwen talking about Ultimate Peter's adventures. Gwen asks if there's a version of her in Peter's world. When she asks if Peter is dating his world's Gwen, he hems and haws around an answer, which she takes to mean he's dating MJ. Peter asks if this world's Mary Jane is a model, like his. Gwen's curiosity is now at 11, but Peter uses May's return to break off the talk. He explains how he needs to go home while Miles wonders if there's a him in Peter's world. He tells May how she raised him, and she asks if Ben is alive. He isn't, but this leads him to breaking out the old, with great power comes great responsibility, which is all she needs to hear to know he's really her nephew. She tells him that Peter told her she was Spider-Man before he died.
What a good idea! Why, the lack of constant lying would certainly forge a stronger bond between nephew and aunt. At least until he was forced to erase her memories in a vain attempt to save her life that results in a pact with the Lord of Evil. Oh, Dark Master, I salute you! Thank you, dear boy, but it does help that Peter's a huge putz. Now, while I help George put the final ink on the deal with Disney, why don't the rest of you bow down to my masters? Corporate America.
They go through the list of people who knew he was Spider-Man in this world before his death, and Peter gets shocked to find out he dated Kitty Pryde. Miles sees a limo waiting and they realize S.H.I.E.L.D. is here. Fury tries to get Miles to go back to school, but both he and Peter want to stick this out until it gets resolved. Peter catches a brief sight of Mary Jane, but she runs off before anything can be said. In the limo, he tells Nick that his version of Fury is white. May waves goodbye, happy to know that somewhere Peter Parker grew up to be a good man, while elsewhere, Mary Jane is in tears. At base, Peter and Tony begin to try and figure out the equations for getting him home, but it's Miles who has a breakthrough. Mysterio's been broadcasting boasts on YouTube, and Miles recognizes one of the buildings in the background as being in Brooklyn. Using that, they can triangulate where his base is.
This is just in case you forgot for 1 second that Miles is a child prodigy. I mean, he goes to a gifted school, he kicked the butt of a superhero infinitely more talented and experienced than him, and he finds Mysterio while all the heroes are in a free-fall of fail! He's smart! We get it!
Back in the regular Marvel Universe, Mysterio is pacing. He's ruined Spider-Man's life, trapped him in a world where Peter Parker is dead, but it's not enough. He needs to see him suffer. He breaks down and decides to send another avatar in, but as soon as he opens the portal, webbing shoots out and drags him through. They take him away, and Tony classifies the portal as being unstable. Fury announces Peter will go through, and then they'll shut the portal down. The Spideys try and get profound, but before Peter can say anything, Mysterio shoulders himself free and types into his computer. This sets off a series of bombs destroying the equipment while Mysterio drops several vials. Iron Man sees the Ultimates dead. Nick Fury sees New York burning. Peter sees Aunt May dead at the hands of his enemies. Miles, his parents killed by his uncle, the Prowler. Miles is the first to break out of the stupor and tackles Mysterio as he runs into the gateway. Amazed at the other world he finds himself in, Miles is unaware that Mysterio is about to cave his head in, but he jumps out of the way and vanishes. He then jumps down and knocks Mysterio back through the gateway. Back in Ultimate Land, Peter clocks him one before Miles zaps him. The Ultimates arrest him, and Peter questions if it's right to imprison him in an alternate dimension. Fury puts it into perspective by asking whether or not he wants a villain who knows his secret identity running around in his world. Iron Man tells him that the portal is closing for good. It's time for Peter to leave. Peter tells Miles that he's glad the young man is here to keep the Spider-Man name alive. Miles asks him what he was going to say before Mysterio interrupted them. Peter tells him not to let anyone clone him, date one girl at a time, don't let Dr. Octopus marry his aunt, don't lend money to Wolverine or Mockingbird, leave the crime scene as soon as he beats a bad guy lest they make you clean up, and wash his costume daily. But the most important thing is, if he ever sees a...
He was going to say something about red pigeons, but unfortunately the portal sent him back to Earth a split second too soon. Aww.
Fury congratulates Miles on earning Peter's blessing, and the young man swings away into a brand new day. Back at his apartment, a curious Peter decides to enter Miles Morales' name into a search engine. Whatever it is that he finds leaves him stunned.
So once again, the heroes win by sheer force of numbers and finding creative ways to defeat the villain, i.e. cheating. Someday, Dr. Doom or Lex Luthor is going to win, and it's not going to be an Elseworlds tale. Let's take a closer look at Spider-Man.
Let's start with the art. Sarah Pichelli is one of a new breed of artists who's quickly becoming one of Brian Bendis' favorite collaborators. She's really on top of her game with the series hitting the big three: people, props, and scenery. She draws complex and varied cityscapes. She manages convincing guns, generators, and helicopters. And her people all look realistic in a stylized way. She also draws really good action scenes. The flow of these fights, especially between the two Spideys, is dynamic and easy to follow. As for Bendis' story, I've always been of two minds on Brian Michael Bendis. I've never been a fan of his super team books like The New Avengers. However, with smaller, more personal books like Ultimate Spider-Man and Powers, his characterization is top-notch, and you really feel as though you know and empathize with the characters in the story. So it should come as no surprise that a miniseries based on one of his most popular books is well written. It's a surprisingly small yet poignant story. One minor complaint is that the pacing isn't great. This is basically 5 single issues instead of one story told in 5 parts. Issue 1 is Peter in the regular Marvelverse. Issue 2 is Peter versus Miles. Issue 3 is Mysterio versus the Ultimates. Issue 4 is Peter meeting Aunt May and Gwen of the Ultimate Universe. And finally, Issue 5 is the Ultimates versus Mysterio. Each issue seems to want to stand on its own instead of telling a part of the larger story. And if we're going to look at them individually, let's be frank. Issue 4 is worth the price of admission alone. This idea that you can step into a world where you died, find your grieving loved ones, some of whom are dead in your world, and have these instant connections was fascinating. It's a great way for May and Gwen to have a chance to get closure. It also breaks your heart to see MJ run away. There is no closure there. Just a reminder that the boy she loved is gone and never coming back. Miles, however, gets shortchanged. This is clearly Peter's story, and Miles is just along for the ride, although the ending shows a nice bond has built between the two. But this leads into one of my few problems with the miniseries. It's obviously written from the Ultimate Universe point of view. This is Spider-Man guest starring in Ultimate Spider-Man. Not a meeting of the two worlds, it's just Peter going into the Ultimate Universe. Now, this is smart on several levels. It will appeal to those who read Ultimate Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man by starring their characters. For those casual readers who just want to read this event, or even readers who don't read Ultimate Spider-Man, it should still work as the Ultimate Marvel Universe was the template for the Marvel movies. This is the Nick Fury and Iron Man as played by Sam Jackson and Robert Downey Jr., so it feels familiar to all these different groups. However, for the hardcore Marvel junkies, it's a bit of a letdown. We never get to see any of the Marvel mainstays outside of Peter interact with the Ultimate Universe. Imagine Iron Man coming over and he finds himself still drinking, or a post-9/11 Captain America viewing New York post-Ultimatum. There were a lot of opportunities that got passed on in order to keep the focus on the Spideys, which is as it should be. I just wish they'd spent more time in the regular Marvelverse. Although the cliffhanger ending implies a sequel, and they might be saving that for a follow-up miniseries. As for the ending, I suppose it could be seen as good or bad. If you really want a sequel to this book, then it's a good thing. However, if you're hoping for one complete narrative, then the fact that it sets up this big hook and there's no payoff, or even the announcement of a future payoff in it, can be a bad thing. My biggest issue, however, was the villain. We're supposed to believe that Mysterio from the Ultimate Universe was the same Mysterio as the regular Marvel Universe? Quentin Beck is an X-movie stuntman. There's no way he could devise a way to bridge two universes. On top of that, in his previous appearances in Ultimate Spider-Man, it seemed like Mysterio was using magic. It really seems like Ultimate Mysterio got retconned so we could have this way to bring the two worlds together. Also, I'm not that familiar with the character outside of his appearance in Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil story, where he died. I think I heard they retconned that, but my question, was he always this insane? All he has to do is leave Peter where he is, but that's not enough. He has to see him die. That was pretty nuts.
And there you have it, an emotional story that pays off for longtime readers, even though the villain was shit. Wait a minute! My whole point is that villains are awesome, and here he's written completely out of character. Oh, I knew I should have reviewed Transformers Regeneration 1. You can't go wrong with Megatron. Still, for whatever my opinion is worth, I give Spider-Man 4 out of 5 stars. Although if you've never read Ultimate Spider-Man, that should probably be 3.5 out of 5 stars. Until next time, I am Cloak number 1, and this guy's starting to smell. I better bury him. I'll see you next time on Comic Book Issues.
I am the great and powerful Wizard of Odds.
As?
No, odds. As in probability, chance. For example, what do you think the odds are that there's a dead celebrity in this closet right now?
I'm guessing better than I'd expect.
I manipulate magic based on the defiance of expectation.
Wow, out of all the wizards in the Yellow Pages, you are by far the one that lived closest to me. Can you send me to the one of ancient right? It may be the only way to resurrect the last angry geek.
I can. I just need you to concentrate on this coin, and just like in the movie Somewhere in Time, I will send you back into the past.
I cried like a little girl at the end of that film.
Well, focus on the coin. Focus on your friend. Drizzle, drazzle, druzzle, drome. Time for this one to go home. By the way, how will you be paying for this?
Greetings, my friend. Ha ha ha!